For years, global analysts and media have tried to paint India as the next China, a rising Asian giant that could one day overtake its northern neighbor. With its large population, fast-growing economy, and democratic system, many argue that India is poised to replace China as the world's next big success story. But if we look closely, this comparison doesn't hold up. India may be growing fast, but it's still decades behind China in almost every meaningful area, from technology and infrastructure to governance and global influence. Let's break down the real reasons why India can't beat China, at least not anytime soon. Number 1. Technology self-sufficiency versus reliance on Western tech. One of the biggest differences between China and India lies in technological independence. China has built a self-sufficient tech ecosystem, while India still relies heavily on Western technology, platforms, and software. Let's start with the basics. China has developed its own versions of almost every major Western tech platform: WeChat instead of WhatsApp, Baidu instead of Google, Alibaba instead of Amazon, and TikTok, Douyin, instead of Instagram or YouTube Shorts. The Chinese government encouraged local innovation and limited Western influence early on, creating a domestic environment where homegrown companies could thrive. As a result, China now has some of the world's most powerful tech giants like Huawei, Tencent, Alibaba, and ByteDance. These companies aren't just dominating the Chinese market, they're expanding globally, especially across Asia, Africa, and Europe. Meanwhile, India's tech ecosystem is deeply dependent on Western infrastructure. The majority of India's most used apps are owned or controlled by American companies: WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and Google. Even India's digital economy, including online advertising and cloud storage, relies heavily on US-based services like Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud. When it comes to hardware, China designs and manufactures its own smartphones, chips, and 5G technology. India, however, mostly assembles imported components from China or other countries. China has also built its own version of GPS called Beidou, which now covers the entire world. This allows China to operate its navigation systems independently from the US-controlled GPS. India, by contrast, has a regional system called NAVIC, but it's limited in coverage and capability and not yet adopted by global manufacturers. This independence gives China a major strategic edge. In a world where tech is the backbone of power, China doesn't have to rely on Silicon Valley or Washington to stay connected. India does, and as long as India depends on Western technology, it can't truly surpass China. Number 2. Manufacturing versus services, the development gap. China's rise to power was built on manufacturing, not software or outsourcing. For 4 decades, China has been the world's factory, producing everything from smartphones and semiconductors to high-speed trains and solar panels. Today, China accounts for nearly 30% of global manufacturing output, according to the United Nations Industrial Development Organization. India, in contrast, makes up less than 3%. That difference is massive. China exports goods worth over $3.4 trillion a year, while India's total exports, including services, are around $770 billion. India's economy is heavily driven by its service sector, especially IT and outsourcing. Companies like Infosys, TCS, and Wipro have made India the back office of the world. But services alone can't create the kind of large-scale industrial employment or technological advancement that manufacturing does. The Chinese model focuses on industrial clusters, logistics efficiency, and supply chain integration. Cities like Shenzhen turned from fishing villages into global tech capitals within just a few decades. India has tried to replicate that success with programs like Make in India, but progress has been slow. Why? Because China invested early in infrastructure, education, and energy, ensuring that factories could operate at full capacity. India still struggles with frequent power cuts, poor logistics, and bureaucratic red tape. A factory that takes 6 months to set up in China might take 2 or 3 years in India, if it ever happens. That's why, even when companies like Apple announce plans to move production to India, most of the key components still come from China. India assembles, China manufactures, and that's a huge difference in capability. Number 3. Effective government vs. bureaucratic gridlock. Another critical factor is how each country governs and implements policy. China's centralized government can make long-term decisions and execute them quickly. When Beijing decides to build a new railway, port, or industrial zone, it happens, often within months. The government coordinates between local and national levels, ensuring that projects align with national goals. India, being the world's largest democracy, has a completely different system. While democracy is admirable and gives people a voice, it also creates bureaucratic gridlock. Projects get delayed due to political disagreements, protests, and endless paperwork. For example, in China, it took less than a decade to build a 40,000-kilometer high-speed rail network that connects almost every major city. In India, after years of planning, the country is still working on its first high-speed rail line between Mumbai and Ahmedabad, a project that's been delayed multiple times and may not be completed until the 2030s. The same applies to infrastructure projects, industrial parks, and urban planning. China's city of Shenzhen went from farmland to a megacity of 17 million people in just 40 years. In India, cities like Mumbai and Delhi remain overcrowded, underdeveloped, and lacking in modern infrastructure. China's governance model focuses on results and long-term stability. India's model, while democratic, often leads to short-term populism and slow reforms. Every new government resets priorities, wasting valuable time. This difference in efficiency explains why China consistently meets its development goals while India often falls short. Number 4. Global influence and diplomacy. China's global influence has grown dramatically over the past 2 decades. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, China has built ports, railways, and power plants across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, strengthening its economic and political ties with over 150 countries. India, on the other hand, plays a much smaller role on the world stage. While it's respected for its democracy and cultural heritage, it lacks the financial power and infrastructure diplomacy that China uses so effectively. China is also a founding member and driving force behind organizations like the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB, and BRICS, which now includes major players like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. These institutions allow China to shape global economic rules outside of Western-dominated systems like the IMF and World Bank. Meanwhile, India often aligns with Western powers like the US and participates in groups like the Quad with the US, Japan, and Australia, but these partnerships haven't yet translated into large-scale global influence. Even in trade, China's network is far wider. It's the largest trading partner for over 120 countries, while India doesn't hold that position for any major economy. Diplomatically, China presents itself as the voice of the global South, promoting cooperation without interference in domestic politics. This approach resonates deeply with developing nations tired of Western lectures. India tries to play a similar role but lacks China's financial muscle to back it up. As a result, China is not just an Asian power, it's a global power, shaping the world's economic and political landscape. And number 5, China's economic scale is decades ahead of India. Finally, we come to the most obvious but most important factor: economic scale. China's economy is simply massive. In 2024, China's GDP stood at around 18 trillion compared to India's 3.7 trillion. That means China's economy is roughly 5 times larger. Even if India grows faster percentage-wise, it would take decades to catch up in absolute terms. China's per capita income is about $13,000, while India's is around $2,700. That means the average Chinese citizen is nearly 5 times wealthier. This higher income allows China to invest more in education, research, and innovation, the engines of future growth. China also leads in infrastructure investment, spending about 8% of its GDP annually on roads, rail, and urban development. India spends less than 3%. The results are visible. China's cities are connected by modern highways and airports, while many Indian cities still struggle with traffic jams and pollution. China has also become the world's largest trading nation, exporting more goods than the US, Germany, and Japan combined. India's exports are growing, but it's still far behind in scale and sophistication. Most importantly, China's dominance in industrial supply chains gives it global leverage. From smartphones to solar panels, the world depends on Chinese manufacturing. India's economy, while impressive in IT and services, doesn't yet command that kind of global necessity. In short, China's head start is enormous, and even with rapid growth, India won't be able to close that gap anytime soon. India is a rising power, no doubt about it. It has a young population, strong democracy, and an entrepreneurial spirit. But when compared to China, the difference in development is still vast. China's technological self-sufficiency, manufacturing dominance, efficient governance, global reach, and massive economic scale give it an undeniable advantage. India may follow its own path, but it's not catching up to China soon, because China is still moving faster, planning smarter, and building stronger. In the global race for the future, China isn't looking over its shoulder, it's already miles ahead. So what do you think? Can India ever catch up with China, or has China already won the race for the future of Asia? So what do you think? Do you agree with our video? Tell us what you think by leaving your comments below. And if you like what you watched, make sure to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to show your support.